Hello, welcome to St Paul's Astley Bridge in Bolton. In April 2020 we'd hoped to have an event as part of the National Organ Day. Unfortunately the pandemic got in the way and that had to be cancelled. I was hoping to have the event this April 2021. Unfortunately we're still not socialising in church, so that's had to be cancelled as well. However, this is an online approximation. Can't share the tea and coffee, I'm afraid, that we would otherwise have had, but we'll go and have a look at a bit of the organ. First, a bit about the church. The church was first begun in 1847 and it was dedicated by the first Bishop of Manchester in 1848. Just 20 years later, they decided it wasn't big enough and the side aisles were added to the church, taking the capacity, it's said, up to 1,100 and odd people. I can only assume they were very skinny, underfed mill workers perhaps, because I think it'd be a bit of a tight squeeze to get that many in today. Anyway, let's go inside. It's a bit windy outside here and we'll take a look at the organ. Well, it's a bit warmer inside, not an awful lot, but there we go. The organ behind me was put in 1873. It's not clear what they used when the church was first built, but the organ more or less times in with the time the church was extended. They went to a very well-known builder of the day, Hill and Company, William Hill, who had a pretty tidy reputation. He provided the organ for Manchester Cathedral at roughly the same time. A bit earlier, York Minster had one of his organs, Sydney Town Hall, another very prestigious instrument. And that was probably going through the workshop at about the same time as our organ here. The organ survived reasonably well, one assumes, but in 1964 it had a major rework. When it was first built, the organist used to sit in the middle, under the central pipes. The banner wasn't there, one assumes, in those days. Now the organist sits off the console at one side, and that console was Cowan's creation in 1964. I'm sure he did his best at the time, but to be fair, the quality of the wiring and the components used was, well, certainly not good enough to be lasting now until the 21st century, and it is very much showing its age, and that's one of the major causes of the problems that we have today. We'll go upstairs and have a closer look at some of the issues that we've got. Entering the organ loft is not always for the unwary. After climbing the steps, you find strange signs greet you. Right, here we are at the 1964 console. It's a three-manual organ, it always was. It has three departments, well, four actually. Three manuals. Swell is at the top, grate is in the middle, and choir is down at the bottom. And you know, as I press the notes, nothing actually happens, except for a bit of noise coming from inside. And that's because none of these are drawn. Organ stops. Stops are so called because they stop the thing from making any sound. If we pull some stops out, it will now get sound. Now, as well as the three manuals, we've also got a pedal board down below. And each section, each of the manuals and the pedals have their own selection of stops. So these are the stops for the great organ, the middle one. Start with a quietish flute. Big diapason. Smaller diapason. A full chorus. Now we start to hear some of the problems of the organ. One of the stops hasn't come out properly. It's not speaking. Never mind. The great manual is the bit in the middle at the front, and it's generally the loudest part. The swell is so called because it's actually put inside a box, a swell box, and that has louvered shutters on the front. And those shutters can open and close. When they've closed, they shut the sound off and make it quieter. The choir manual is similar. That also has a box around it, with shutters on the front that can be opened and closed. And with the pedal in that position, all the way back, the box is closed. As I open it, the sound gets louder. Well, I think we should have a look at some of the pipes, because when we look at the organ from a distance, we see these great large pipes in the front, and of course the assumption is that that's what organ pipes are like. Well, they are. Some of the big pipes, the main open diapers, is what we can see at the front. But in actual fact, there's all sorts of shapes and sizes of pipes, some of them very much smaller. We'll take a look at some of those now. Now we're deep inside the organ, and it's not a place for the unathletic or unwary to venture. The tapered pipes with angled tops are the great trumpet, and some of the smallest pipes are hiding further inside, with some being only about 10 centimetres long. It's perhaps easier to see the parts of a pipe in this diagram. Air comes into the bottom of the pipe through the foothole and moves up the conical section until it reaches a horizontal disc called the languid. This blocks much of the width, but leaves a narrow slit, the flue, which forces the air to hit the upper lip. As it does that, it begins to vibrate in the same way as in a recorder or an orchestral flute, and that's what creates the sound. The frequency of the vibration, the pitch of the note, is determined by the length of the pipe body, the resonator, and that's why all pipes vary in length to make the different notes across the keyboard. With a few exceptions, each manual stop on this organ has 56 notes, so 56 pipes with around 43 stops, plus more stops for the 30 pedal notes, gives us around 2,300 pipes in it. The mathematics aren't entirely simple, because some stops, called mixtures, have several pipes per note, but a few stops don't have pipes for every note, and some pipes do double duty, so bringing down the total. These are the typical cylindrical pipes we see in the case that we're fairly familiar with. Air comes in at the bottom, it passes up, and it hits that slightly sharp edge just there, where it begins to vibrate and creates the sound. When we've seen the cylindrical metal pipes outside, quite a few of the organ pipes are made of wood. Here we've got some wooden pipes, and this is the foot of the pipe. The air comes up here, it emerges through a little slot at the front, and it hits this edge. This is actually, well, not sharp so as to cut yourself, but it is playing to a fairly narrow, sharpish edge. And the idea is the air can hit that edge, it begins to vibrate, and that vibration creates the sound. The frequency of the vibration depends on the length of the pipe, so the long pipes, like long strings, would give the lower notes, and the very small pipes, obviously the higher ones. The third type of pipe is a reed pipe. The air comes in the same way, comes in at the bottom of the pipe, passes up here, and around about here it hits a brass reed. Clarinet obviously has the orchestral clarinet that is, has a wooden reed. This has a brass one, but it behaves in the same sort of way. The air comes in at the bottom and hits a brass tongue, the reed. Like an orchestral clarinet, the reed vibrates, creating a pulsating column of air. A clarinetist can open and close holes to change the functioning length of their instrument, but reed pipes in an organ rely on the fixed length of the resonator. The shape of it also determines the tone. The clarinetist does fine tuning by adjusting their lip on the reed, but in an organ reed pipe, that's done with the tuning wire. Early pipe organs, such as the little mini one we see St. Cecilia holding in one of our stained glass windows, were entirely mechanical in their operation. By the time ours were built in 1873, other systems were being used, but it helps to understand the mechanism if we first consider how a simple mechanical system can work. It has to control which pipe the air gets into, depending on which key is pressed, and also which stops have been selected. The section shaded in beige has compressed air inside. It's at a very low pressure, only a small fraction of a pound per square inch, but that's all that's needed for the pipes to work. When a key is pressed, a valve, called a pallet, is opened and the air can enter the bottom of the pipe. This diagram shows an organ with just 3 stops, but only one of them is selected. The other 2 are prevented from sounding because only one of the 3 sliders beneath the pipes has its holes in line with the bottom of the pipe. The position of the other 2 stops the air from getting to those pipes. Here we see an organ partially dismantled, and the sliders are made of the darker wood, and they can be moved to make their holes align, or not, to select which pipes speak. Our organ doesn't use mechanical connections from the keys, but has electromagnets to open and close the pallets, a bit like we see in this diagram.
Just at the top of this picture we can see the end of some of the slides that allow air into particular ranks of pipes. And here on the underside of the swell wind chest we can see the magnets that open and close each of the individual pallets. We also get a glimpse of some of the original decoration of the church.
The changes made in 1964 to our organ were fine for their time, but not many electrical appliances from the 1960s are still in good order, and that's true of our organ. In most years the organ builders make a full day and a half-day visit to do repairs and tune it, and I also spend more time keeping things in order. Sadly, many of the electrical components added in the 60s are now very worn out. Switch contacts and wiring is failing, and the leather parts are perishing. When that is added to the very dirty condition of the instrument, we are at a point that a very thorough cleaning and overhaul is needed, and it won't be cheap.
I'm sorry it wasn't possible to have the organ open day in 2020 that we'd planned, and the event rescheduled for 2021 as part of the Royal College of Organists International Organ Week also fell victim to the plague. Pandemic conditions permitting, I'm always very glad to welcome visitors to the organ loft and to answer any questions, to invite them to try it for themselves. We're very lucky to have this wonderful instrument that our 19th century forebears had the wisdom to buy. It's not in the best of condition, as we've seen. It has problems, but played with a bit of ingenuity, it can still make some magnificent sounds, and well, I feel it's a very useful enhancement to our worship here. Because of that, we have an obligation to our successors as well, to look after it and to keep it in good order so that they can also enjoy it as part of their services too. Well, thank you for listening to this video. There's plenty of examples of this organ online and other organs, and of course they're all different, which is one of the delights of being an organist, as well as being a power-crazed maniac, of course.